entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. As we've been talking, I think that, and we'll talk, we're going to dig into this a little bit more because I have some more questions, but the one that's kind of popping into my head right now is about young people. They fear that they can't buy a house. It's too expensive to get into the market.
They need to find a side hustle. They need to find it. Guys, if that's you and you're listening, you got to find a side hustle. Try different things. See what you like. Because when you love what you do, work is play. Okay? And when you love what you do, you never work another day in your life. And you're passionate about it. And what's required to influence people? Passion. Okay? To raise money? Passion. To influence somebody to sell you a business or sell you a apartment complex? Passion. And so, but when you love what you do, you have that passion. And so figure out what you might love to do, and you might have to try a few different things, and then just buckle down and learn it. Study it. And then don't be afraid to take action. Don't be afraid to fail. Okay? I told you I've built 29 businesses. And I've got several that are worth tens of millions of dollars, but most are spectacular flaming, I call them seminars, is failures, okay? And we fail our way to success, okay? Yeah. Don't fear failure. Fear being in the same freaking place you are right now 2 or 3 years from now. That's what you want to fear. Fear regret. I tell the story about this nurse in Australia, hospice nurse, that used to take care of people that were about to die. And she asked him a question, Dwayne. The question was, do you have any regrets? And she even wrote a book about it. It's like a bestseller, something like The 5 Regrets of Dying, I think. Her name was Bronnie Ware. And you know what the number one regret was? Not living the life I could have lived, living someone else's life. So I don't care how old you are. Suck it up. Go do my goal setting workshop. Go to rodslinks.com. Do my goal setting workshop. Get juiced. Create that burning desire. Figure out what you want to go do. Go learn it and go do it. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, let's talk a little bit about opportunities in real estate for young people.
Okay.
Sure. I'd love to get your insight.
You can flip. You can wholesale if you need to develop some cash. You can flip properties, okay? You can wholesale where you put a property under contract and you flip the contract, okay? You don't even own the property. You just put it under contract, but before you do that, you have some buyers lined up, okay? You don't just screw out a seller. You don't go find the buyer after you put it under contract and screw somebody up. But you find people that are buying property, and I teach this as well at the boot camp. But then you put it under contract and you sell the contract to somebody for a couple bucks. I'll tell you something. I put something in my Warrior Facebook group 2 years ago. I said, how many of you have wholesaled a multifamily property and made over $100,000? A dozen had, okay? 2 made over $1 million, okay? Flipping a contract. They didn't own the property. They just made, that was somebody just posted like last week. Mike, didn't he just post like 60 grand? He did, yeah, just literally made 60 grand last week on a wholesaling a deal.
Okay, so explain that. I didn't even know that was a thing.
So what you do is you go to a seller and you put the property under contract, but you make the contract assignable, and then you've got people, and it's got to be a decent deal, obviously, but you find a good deal, and then you've got people that are buying properties, and you say, hey, I've got this thing under contract. Do you want it? And you upchart, you make a piece for doing it. And it can be, like I said, I had a dozen people make over $100,000, 2 made over $1 million, wholesaling multifamily. And people know about wholesaling single family, but hardly anybody knows about wholesaling multifamily, and you can. And so that's a vehicle, flipping, wholesaling.
Sorry, are those wholesaling, are they deals that are not on the market at this time?
It depends.
Kind of hunting for them?
Probably mostly not on the market. Most of the guys that do this for a business, they have a mailing campaign or they outbound cold call or whatever.
So they're searching for properties and making deals.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a way to make quick cash. The only problem with it is you're only as good as your last deal.
Yeah.
And so what most people do is they'll maybe do some of that to start, and then they'll get into what I do, which is buying assets for cash flow. The name of my podcast is Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing, because you're creating lifetime cash flow. And I hope you'll check it out, by the way. It's at Rod's Links. My podcast link is there, and it's the largest in the world for what I do. I'm blessed to say. Really proud of that. But anyway, so that's the way to do it in real estate. If you're young and you need to make some quick bucks, look at flipping and wholesaling. Go on YouTube University or come to my boot camp. You'll learn how to do it with multifamily. But that's a way to make some quick cash. But then ultimately you're going to want to buy and hold. You're going to want to buy assets that throw off cash flow. If you're going to move into a place, buy a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex. Don't buy a house.
Yeah,
buy a plex and rent out the other units, and at some point you'll be living for free.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. When you buy at least in the United States, when you buy a plex, you can use the rents from the other units to qualify for a hell of a lot more than you'd be able to qualify for by yourself. So, you can use, I think it's 75% of the lease, whatever it's leased for, to qualify for a plex. But even if you do buy a house, maybe you rent the rooms out, and it's called house hacking. It really is what you're doing. You're house hacking, and you'll ultimately live for free.
That's what I did when I started. When I bought my first house, I was I think 21 or 22 years old, and I put 7 bedrooms in it, and I was like a slumlord. I filled it with all my buddies, and it allowed me to create some equity in order to buy the next business that I bought, and then. That's exactly how I started. And I think like there's, 2 conversations, especially for young people, or if you're a parent and you have kids who are in that age range where there's, thinking about the market and real estate and buying their first home, I think part of the process is everybody thinks that they should be able to buy their own home and be their home and just, me and my girlfriend or me and my wife, and it's like, a
lot of people have that white picket fence mentality. They want that. But listen, if you can think as an investor on your first home and start your investment career, man, that's the way to go. That's the way to go. Now, you can still enjoy where you live, but maybe you find a fixer-upper and you and your spouse get in there, you fix it up, and you bond through that process, and then you move on to the next one.
And that would be the flip, right?
Yeah, that would be, it could maybe a flip. Seems you think it's happened more quickly, but maybe you stay in it for a year and then you buy your next one. But have that investment hat on when you're doing that. That's the message.
Mm-hmm. And then so from getting like, let's use just a triplex as an example.
Uh-huh.
So if you're a young guy and you got a couple buddies and you're like, hey, we want to get a place.
I wouldn't buy it with the buddies. I would try to buy it on your own. But I'd bring the buddies in to rent units. That's how I would do it. Because if there's ever angst or, by the way, in Rod's links, there's a book called Questions You Should Ask Before You Get in a Partnership. And because partnerships, like a marriage, are easy to get into and hard to get out of, okay? And there's questions, you get caught up in the excitement, and a lot of partnerships fail because of a lack of communication or you didn't ask the hard questions up front. Get that book if you're going to get into a partnership. It's a great book, and there's lots of other great books there. You
That's the ebooks, right? That
ebooks,
you have, yeah. We're going to be guys. We're going to post these links in the show notes, and then we'll also be on our website. So
don't worry. Links? Yep. You can text the word links to 72345 and we'll send you it as well. If you're driving and you want to remember this, text links to 72345 and it's got my link tree, all those free resources, goal setting workshop, the boot camp website, all that stuff's there.
Okay.
Podcast link is there.
Oh, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, this is unbelievably fantastic information.
Thanks.
In terms of just going back, clarity of what market to get into. How critical is
critical.
that?
Yeah, and
what advice do you have?
Again, okay, I'll give you some highlights. Of course, we dig into it a lot more at the event, but so you want to make sure, and let me give you some websites you can use for this. You can go to bestplaces.net, datausa.io, citydata.com, census.gov. These are websites you can go to and do demographical research, area research. And you want to see that jobs are growing. Jobs is the number one thing. Population's growing and income's growing. And there's some markets in the United States where that's not the case, like Detroit, for example. But you want to see income, population, and jobs growing. Jobs is the most important. You want to see employment industry diversity. I like the South because there's 80 million baby boomers getting old and getting cold. But I've got assets in Ohio. I've got assets in the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, Georgia. Those are markets I like. But, I'm in Florida, so I stay over on this side. I wouldn't want to be over in Arizona, for example. Texas, I've got quite a lot in Texas. Yeah. But that's as far west as I go.
And then how do you decide, multi-residential, and I don't know the verbiage in terms of the different markets. So like where you want to go, like how do you, for somebody
inside a city, you talk to a broker, you make relationships with brokers, you find out, you can go on spotcrime.com and see where the hood is and see where the bad areas are, and you want to look at that. That's super important. And and decide where, like in Dallas, is huge metroplex, and there's submarkets. You want to decide what submarkets you want to get into, and
if there's pros and cons between duplexes, triplexes.
Well, I'm speaking now bigger apartments,
bigger stuff.
Yeah, like 10 units or more. But I don't like the small stuff. I mean, if you're young and you want to get into a plex, fine. But the problem with the plex is the value is based on comparable sales. And you can't dictate that. There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
And so, you could have a beautiful place and fix it up, but your value is never going to be more than what other properties have sold for. But like I told you, if you go 5 units or higher, you can force the appreciation, force the value through your efforts, improving the income.
Based on that cap rate.
Based on the income and the cap rate.
Yeah.
But the main thing is the income. The NOI. It's called the net operating income, NOI. That's the acronym. Any improvement to that NOI is an exponential improvement to the value. And so, that's why I suggest, now certainly to buy, to live in, the residential multifamily duplex, triplex, fourplex is fantastic because they have fantastic debt. You can get 3% down for an FHA loan here in the States, 5% down with Fannie Mae. And if you're a vet, you can get 0 down. Okay.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 0 financing on a fourplex, 0% down financing. You can get in for no money out of pocket. It's fantastic. So, for your first place, absolutely do a plex. So you can do a plex, but after that, you're going to want to go larger because you can force the appreciation. Yep.
Yeah, that's and back to the comment that you made, whereas when you go in, you're walking in and you're looking for ways to improve the value of the
right. But again, with a plex, you can only go so far.
Yeah.
Right. But for a plex, if you can live for free and house hack and build some equity and then sell and do something else, maybe buy a larger one the second time, fantastic way to start.
Yeah. And I think that I'm just going to say, guys, like all these conversations lead to thought process around what your vision is, where you are, what capital do you have, and what is the 10-year, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan based on setting your goals, which then goes back to, what we talked about, which is downloading your goal setting program.
You should do that anyway. I don't care what you're going to get into. You need to know what the hell you want and why you want it. And that's a great way to do it. And like I said, have your family do it.
It's, dude, your experience in this industry is mind-blowing. We had originally I had written down a few things: due diligence, wealth strategy, inflation hedge, valuation. So I think we kind of covered due diligence and valuation, but
and inflation hedge too. Because again, inflation impacts rents, and when you buy a property, your mortgage amount is locked. Okay, so the mortgage isn't going to go up, but your rents are going to go up. And again, what improves the value? The net income. So if rents go up, your net income goes up, your value goes up. So inflation, there's honestly no better hedge against inflation than real estate, than commercial real estate, like this multifamily we're talking about, because again, the value is based on a multiple of the net income. So there you go.
There's one difference here between Canada and the U.S., and we have probably a little bit more listeners in Canada, but we're all close to 50-50 now.
Okay.
But just for our Canadian listeners, like, because you guys can get a mortgage and it can be a 20 or 30-year mortgage.
Correct.
And the rate doesn't change. And
you can. Okay, in commercial real estate, you can get a 30-year amortization of your mortgage, but you're going to have a 5 or 10-year balloon.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
5 or 10-year term.
Oh, yeah, term.
Okay, that's correct. How we do it up
That's
in
correct.
In
so
Canada.
it's the same, but you get the amortization you need, but you're going to have a term, and you'll have to refinance or sell when that term happens.
Okay.
Now, if you're buying the plexes like we talked about, you can get 30-year fixed. Okay, I mean, those loans are fantastic, but you're not going to get that on commercial.
Right. Okay. Got it. No. So on the plexes, you can get the fixed.
Yeah, on the plexes. If you're going to move in, you got to move in to get those types of loans.
So it's basically got to be like almost a primary residence type.
Well,
of
no,
thing.
it has not basically. It has to be a primary residence. You've got to, and don't play with that. Don't put the utilities in your name or some shit like that. No, move in, live there, and you get fantastic debt. 3% down, 5% down, you can't beat it.
Right.
30-year fixed mortgage, the interest rate's fixed. It's fantastic.
Wealth strategies. Paint a picture, like, for, and I'm kind of like, you've got a couple of, I guess, different people who are maybe thinking about this. It's like, hey, I got my own business, or I've got a job and I want to start investing in real estate and creating a portfolio. And what would the wealth strategy what could it look like? What would maybe be some of the strategies?
Well, here's what the wealthy do. They do exactly that. They take their money they make elsewhere and they invest it in assets that produce returns. And the nice thing about real estate is it's leveraged by the property, okay? And if you've got an operator that knows what they're doing and they don't get this risky debt that I've been talking about, it's a very safe and secure investment, versus the stock market that's got incredible volatility, right? And if you can get a 15 to 18% return on your investment, I mean, that's some pretty damn good return. And so, that's how the wealth get wealthier, is they take their money and they put it to use. It doesn't make much sitting in a bank account. So you've got to invest it, but you got to carefully invest it. You've got to do your homework before you invest it. So, that's the wealth strategy right there. That's the ultimate wealth strategy. You take your money and you invest it in something that produces those sorts of returns. And at some point you'll eclipse your W-2 income, and then you can retire. I've got multiple students that have done it, doing it that way.
Real estate is not my game, so it's I'm loving this conversation because I'm learning, but it seems to me like when you talked earlier about increasing the value of the rents and the properties, then you could refinance and take your original.
That's that BRRRR method: buy, renovate, refinance, repeat, and you just keep rolling. And here's the other beautiful thing about that: there's no taxable consequence. You refinance, there's no tax. Okay, you only pay a tax if you sell. If you never sell, you're never going to pay a sales tax, the tax on that property. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here in the States, you don't refinance this, and you can pull money out, and it's tax free.
Yeah, no. As far as I know, like same thing. You're refinancing. You only pay when you sell on the gain of the property.
Correct.
And
the other thing here is, we've got cost segregation and accelerated depreciation, where you can have very significant write-offs the first and second year. Now, they even had bonus depreciation, which they've been cutting down. The Biden administration cut it down, and we'll see if Trump brings it back. But you can have significant write-offs your first year here in the States with what's called cost segregation.
Yeah, well, and that's, I think, what a lot of people, especially some of the people I'm talking to most recently, is they're looking for some type of tax strategy because especially in Canada, the taxes have gotten egregious. Wow. Yeah. And so
I can see why you're moving, bro.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Yeah. So, but what advice do you? What advice do you have? I'm really curious about this question because I did say earlier that I was going to tell the story when we first met, and the story that I recall is this. This goes back many, many years. We're sitting on the stairs at the front of an event that has not started yet, and we're shooting the breeze. We introduce each other. You probably don't remember this, and it stuck out to me because at the time we're sitting down, we're talking. I'm like, hey, what do you do? And a lot of people who actually at that time worked security were business owners. They were business guys, and they were from the environment, and they were there to contribute and help. Right. And so, not surprising, like Rod and I are sitting there and we're shooting the breeze and you're talking to me about real estate. And I remember you saying, I lost $50 million. Mm-hmm. It was just after you lost it.
So it must have been 2009, right?
It was around that. Yeah, it was around 2009.
Yeah.
And you're like, I lost $50 million in real estate like last year. And I remember going back to my wife going, holy shit, that guy Rod? I was telling her the story. But what impressed me most was your attitude towards it.
Well, thank God I was in the Tony Robbins environment because, they don't allow we talked about this when on the other episode we did was, pain is going to happen, but suffering is optional. Mm-hmm. And luckily I was in that environment to pivot my mindset. I'm certainly not going to take credit for that shift, because he's the best in the world at helping you shift that stuff. And so
but you were the guy that has to shift it.
Well, true, very true. But you can wallow in pain, and people end up jumping out of buildings over stuff like that. And I just picked myself up and got back to it. And that's and candidly, it's those strategies, those success strategies that I teach around that I get the most pleasure from. It's because 80 to 90% of your success in anything is mindset. And so, that's why my podcast has been so successful, because I spend time talking about that. I do these little clips every week called Own Your Power. Today was the one, I just did one, and it was about the strength you get from pushing through obstacles, pushing through setbacks. And that was today's episode. I literally recorded it this morning. And people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. And so, these things make you really look in the mirror and feel. And I know that's the reason that my show has been so successful. But yeah.
What were some of the biggest learning lessons, and how? Well, so I'm interested in what were the biggest learning lessons from a real estate perspective on the science side, because you talked about the art of fulfillment and the science of achievement. Mm-hmm. On the science side, what were some of the lessons? But then on the fulfillment side, what was that? And I probably wouldn't mind spending time there first. Is where did you go? Was there
well,
probably not a deep depression?
I can talk about the psychology of it.
Yeah.
I can talk about the steps that I took to get back out of it,
which are
the same steps you'd take to get started. Well, the first thing is, you've got to get clear on your goals. So I reassociated with my goals. That was the number thing. But if you're just getting started, you need to do your goals. Get your ass to my link tree and watch that goal setting workshop and do it. That'll juice you. But you got to know what it is you want and why you want it. So it starts there. Then you have to make a decision. Okay, and the Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. It's not dipping your toe in the water. It's done. You're going to do it. You make that decision. And like an analogy for a real decision, if you're going to attack the island in battle, you burn your ships because you're taking their damn ships home. That's a decision, okay? So I had to make a decision to stop wallowing in my pity party back then, but maybe if you're just getting started, you got to make a decision to move forward with something, actually do something. And that's the next piece. You got to take that first step. And Dr. Martin Luther King said, you take that first step in faith, the next step will be revealed. And Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But you got to take that step. And sometimes that little step can be the most important step of your life. So you
take
the
hardest step.
And the hardest. Yeah, it can be the hardest, but you got to do it. And then, we talked about playing to your strengths. That's critical. If you're playing to your strengths, you're loving what you're doing. And when you're loving what you're doing, you're passionate about it and you can influence people. We talked about peer group. You've got to get around people that want more out of life. That's why my warrior coaching program is so successful, because they're lifting each other up. A rising tide lifts all ships, right? You want to be around people who think what you think is hard is easy. So peer group is critical. And you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have to deal with fear and limiting beliefs. And what's fear? F everything and run. That's what most people think it is. I like to think it's false evidence appearing real, for sure, because it is. I like to think it's face everything and rise. Massive action mitigates fear. Gratitude mitigates fear. We'll talk about gratitude in a second, but and then limiting beliefs. When I immigrated this country, I got thrown into school and found out what bullies were for the first time. And then my mom, God bless her heart, thought it'd be a great idea to send me the wooden shoes that are sitting right behind you on the floor there. She sent me to school in those wooden shoes and those leather shorts that are behind you that the Germans wear for Oktoberfest. So I got my ass kicked again, from showing up like that. And I came up with a belief system that I wasn't good enough. I used to ask myself, how can I show them I'm good enough? Which, of course, presupposed I wasn't. And a lot of people have these limiting belief systems. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not analytical enough. That was another one of mine. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I'm too old. I'm too young, whatever. And there's a reason the acronym for belief systems is BS, because 99% of them are BS. But we believe they're real.
Right.
And so you got to push through that crap, and recognize that. And maybe you're comfortable. And the comfort zone's a nice warm place. We all know not a damn thing grows there, right? So you got to get uncomfortable to create that life you want. And then gratitude. Gratitude is the most important foundational emotion we have available to us. You can't be stressed and grateful at the same time. You can't be fearful and grateful at the same time. You can't be angry and grateful at the same time. Gratitude strengthens our immune system. It lowers our blood pressure. It brings us closer to our spirituality. It's how you manifest everything you want in life. I do this exercise most mornings where I'll sit in my recliner and I'll just be grateful for the people that I love in my life, the people I work with, my students. And then I'll do gratitude for the things that I want as if I already have them. And sometimes I've gotten emotional being grateful for things I don't even have yet, okay? And I know some of you analytical ones might be going, oh, good God, we're in foo-foo land. Well, this is how I had $50 million to lose and how I got it back, okay? So ignore it at your peril. But that's,
right.
But that's how you incorporate whatever you want. And that's how you manifest what you want, through gratitude. That's how you could call it prayer if you like.
Listen, it's great. It's amazing advice. It's not great advice. It's amazing, and it's integral advice, because everybody goes through loss at some point in time, and whatever magnitude of loss that is really based on your beliefs.
Sure.
And you frame that out in your own condition.
It's the meaning you place on it.
That's right.
Life is about meaning. It doesn't matter what happens to you. Two people can have the same seemingly horrific event happen to them, and one comes out stronger, another one comes out destroyed. So life is about the meaning you place on it. Yeah.
You had just made a distinct, statement about the limiting beliefs, and then it sounded like a primary question that you were asking yourself.
How can I show them I'm good enough?
Yeah,
that was my shitty question.
Yeah. So how did you? When did you identify that? And then
my 8th Tony Robbins event, I cried for about 30 minutes. I'm like, holy shit, that's it. That's the reason I've been so successful, but that's also the reason I lost my family, because I was so focused on success, I wasn't present at home. And so, that was a very eye-opening moment for me. It was my 8th Tony event. You go to these Tony Robbins events and you look in the mirror and you self-actualize. It took me 8 of them to figure that out. But, and then I obviously replaced it with a more empowering question. And, how can I share even more of my incredible love and joy with myself and others? That's my new question. So, but that self-reflection is critical, guys. So if you're listening to this and you're not self-actualizing, you're not reading books about this, Think and Grow Rich, The Richest Man in Babylon, some of these books that cause you to look in the mirror and look at your life and look at what you're doing, go see people like Tony Robbins or other motivational speakers, and or listen tapes and or actually now it's not tapes anymore. That really dated me. But listen to that stuff. Listen to podcasts that talk about this stuff. A life unexamined, Socrates said, a life unexamined is a life not worth living. You need to be looking in the mirror and improving. And candidly, if you're not growing, you are dying. Period. If you're plateaued, you're dying. You need to be growing. And happiness comes from progress and growth. So, if you're not happy, 2 things. One, you're focused on yourself, focus outwardly. Okay, that's one. And number 2 is you're not progressing or growing. You're not feeling it. So like if you go and do my goal setting workshop, at the end of that, I do a weekly planning process that I teach my students. It's part of the goal setting workshop at Rod's Links. And and part of that process on when you're doing your weekly plan is celebrating anything you got done the previous week. I don't care if it was 10 minutes of some growth in something, because you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have failures, but if you acknowledge your progress and growth, you'll be happy. And so it's critical that you consciously, and that's the operative word, consciously acknowledge your progress and growth. So, yeah.
That is good advice. Probably something I don't think, if I self-reflect, I probably don't do that well enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really, really good advice. What did that first primary question that you had? How do I show them?
Where'd that come from? Well, getting thrown to school, the wooden shoes are right behind you on the floor. Yeah, there, by the way. Yeah. I went to school in those. Can you imagine? That was like crack cocaine for the fucking bullies, you know.
Yeah.
So I got my ass kicked, and then I had this experience on the playground where I had this crush on this girl. Her name was Carolyn, and I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I was 9 years old, and I made the mistake of telling my friend Becky that I liked Carolyn. And so one day I'm on the playground, I see her with seemed like half the school, it's probably about 10 kids, come up to me in the playground, and she comes right up to me, she says, "Do you like mustard?" And I just said yes to anything, and I said, "Yeah, I like mustard." She said, "Well, I hate mustard and I hate you." And they all laughed. And that coupled with the bullies caused me to think I wasn't good enough. And it took me a lot of work to get past that. I used to be afraid to raise my hand in front of like 10 kids in school. Now I speak in front of thousands of people a year in flip-flops and shorts. I don't give a shit anymore. But that's, but I had to work on it. And how do you, so if you're listening and you've got one of these BS limiting belief systems, you need to drag it out into the daylight when it pops up. You need to consciously look at it. And if you do, you'll recognize that it's BS. And if you do that enough times, it'll diminish and go away. But the operative word there is consciously. You've got to, when it shows up in your life, consciously step outside, look at it with your adult rational mind, recognize that it's BS, and it will diminish and go away. And so that's my advice. If you have one of those, you're consciously aware of it. Sometimes you're not aware of it. Mm-hmm. But if you're consciously aware of it, that's how you deal with it.
For the listeners, there's actually a chapter in Tony's book, Awaken the Giant Within. I don't know what the chapter is, but there is a chapter about primary question that will lead you through the process to discover what it is. And awareness is, probably
it's
the first key, right? Yeah. It's the thing that just kills people because they don't see it. And
you may have issues in your relationship, and awareness of those issues is the first step, as well. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And so many people's primary question gets created when they're at the age that you just those formative years.
You didn't come up with it.
Yeah. It wasn't a conscious thing. Right. Yeah. It was given to you, or it ended up being bestowed on you by certain experiences in your life.
Right.
And you don't really notice. And then all of a sudden you live with it for 20, 30,
and
40
it impacts
years.
your life negatively. In my case, it was a double-edged sword. It caused me to be a huge success financially because I had to prove I was good enough, right? That's why I built that house on the beach I mentioned, I had to prove I was good enough. But it also cost me time with my kids. I was so focused when I'd come home it's my greatest regret in life. I'd come home and I'd play with them every day, but I wasn't present. I was mentally not there. It's my greatest regret to this day. My kids will tell you I was a great dad. I'm having dinner with them tonight, but I didn't live up to my own expectations. And so that's why if you've got kids, I highly recommend, not only do you do the goal setting, but do the weekly planning, because I teach you how to carve out time for them so you don't have that regret in life. Super important.
Yeah. On the science of achievement side.
Science of achievement achievement is a science, okay? Seriously, and I can only use my example. If you want to learn multifamily, I'll give you the blueprint. You just got to go do it. Okay. And the reason I'm blessed to have the success that I have with my students is I spend so much time on mindset at my boot camps that people actually take action with what they learn. They leave so juiced they're coming out of their skin. But the bottom line is achievement really is a science. You just got to, and that's why if you're going to learn something, go find a thought leader that teaches it. Like, Keith Cunningham for buying a business, me for multifamily. If there's something else you want to learn, flipping, wholesaling, go find those people and learn it. Pay the money. Pay for speed, okay? Pay the money to learn how to do this, and because it's a science. You just got to get the blueprint and the map from someone, then you just got to go kick ass and take massive freaking action and go do it. That's it. There's no rocket science to this. All these things have already been determined. These pathways to success, they're scientific. You just got to go do it. But fulfillment, like we said, is an art. You got to figure out what juices you, that you love, that you're passionate about, and give back to that.
Yeah, and on the science of achievement side, like I would say, also I'd add to this is like, there's not much out there that hasn't been figured out
exactly.
No, so pay for it. Go pay for speed.
Yeah,
go
multifamily.
Get educated.
There's no secret sauce here, man. Yeah. People teach it different ways. I don't think anyone's anywhere near as successful as I am as far as teaching it. That's not ego, just reality. But I think the reason for that is that I incorporate the mindset piece into it, which most people don't. But the actual technical side of the business, there's no secret sauce. Well, maybe AI is going to bring some components now. I'm excited about possibility there. But beyond that, it's how you find the properties, evaluate the properties, finance them, and raise the money for them, and manage them. This hasn't changed for decades.
On the loss of the $50 million in 2008, what were some of the takeaways looking back on, reflecting, hindsight being 2020, on the science of achievement side, on the skill side?
Let me share that. So I had 800 houses along the Gulf Coast of Florida here. They were 2 hours north of me, 2 hours south of me, and everywhere in between along the coast here. And I had several apartment complexes. It was the houses that pulled me down. So these were C-class houses. So it's a working class demographic. They're tougher on the houses. These are houses that were older, okay? And so a lot of maintenance. And the maintenance was probably the biggest killer. But here in Florida, we have no state income tax. So property taxes are higher, which impact cash flow. I had properties in wind and flood zones, higher insurance, impacts cash flow. But what killed me was the maintenance. If I had to send a guy to one of my houses, and let's say it's an hour away, they got to go to the house, because every house is different. And see, if they went to one of my apartment complexes, we could stockpile parts, okay? Plumbing parts, electrical parts, drywall, locks, HVAC parts, window locks, door locks, you name it. You could stockpile the parts. They're in and out in an hour.
Right.
Okay. Well, if they had to go to a house that's an hour away, they'd have to go there, see what's wrong, go find a Home Depot or a Lowe's where we have an account and pick stuff up. And I don't know about you, but when Rod's happy ass tries to pick something, he ends up going to Home Depot or Lowe's more than once because you forget something.
Right.
And the same with these maintenance guys. So what took an hour at one of my apartment complexes took all day at one of my houses, 800 houses. So I never really cash flowed that well. I was always banking on appreciation. And then the other thing was I didn't pay attention to tenant demographics back then. If they had a good job and they had good credit, I'd let them rent. Well, I found out after the fact that I had tons of contractors in my houses. I had plumbers, electricians, drywallers, painters, roofers. They didn't have work. That fell off a cliff, so they couldn't pay the rent. And now I pay attention to tenant demographics. I see where people work. It's super important. One of the things you look at in the due diligence process. But so that was the other piece. But what's interesting is I only owed 30 cents on the dollar. I was at a 30% loan to value, and I still crashed and burned in 2008 and 9. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
And you want to know what else is crazy? By the end of 2009, my portfolio was upside down. It dropped more than 70%. True story. Yeah.
And then you had to unload it all?
No, I tried to unload it. Couldn't unload it. Lost it all. I had hundreds of foreclosures. I got wiped out.
It's unbelievable.
And I'd cross-collateralized the apartment complexes with packages of houses to save 50 basis points, 0.5% interest. So I lost everything. I didn't just lose the houses. I lost everything.
So some of the things that you would have done differently, not cross-collateralize?
Well, I wouldn't have done houses. I'll never own another house again unless it's a third, fourth, fifth house for me. I'll never do houses again. But, because my apartments did just fine. They pulled back about 11%, but they would have survived if I hadn't cross-collateralized them. And that's the reason I started my podcast, to tell people, if you're going to buy and hold, for fuck's sake, do multifamily, don't do single family.
Like with single family, because a lot of people think like, I should have some single family. And
well, listen, everybody starts there,
yeah.
but they always want to go bigger. And I'm just saying, there's no reason to not get a 5-unit, a 10-unit. Candidly, a 10-unit is probably easier to buy than a single family. Why? Because the bank isn't looking at your debt to income; they're looking at the property's ability to service the debt. It's called the debt service coverage ratio. Again, I teach all this at the boot camp as well. And so, it's probably easier to buy a 10-unit than a single family house.
Which is crazy.
Most people, crazy to think about
most people have that scarcity mindset. They don't think about that.
People have this courage muscle, and so they start small. I've met maybe 2 or 3 people that started with a 100-unit complex. Everybody else starts at a house or a duplex. That's it. It's the way it works. And then you get that, okay, that's all there was. I also have with my students, have the law of the first deal. It's the hardest. It's the most stressful. It might be 6 months in. They're like complaining they haven't got a deal. I'm kicking them in the ass. Keep going. And then, maybe even 8 months in, then they get that first deal, right? Next thing you know, they have 3. I'm like, what just happened? Well, it's the law of the first deal. They realize it's all in their head.
I mean, to me, it sounds like if you're going to get into real estate, spend time with a pro that's done it. Learn from the pros. Learn from the pros, man.
If you're going to get into anything, it's already been done. The battles have been fought. The wheel is put together. You don't have to recreate the wheel. It's already there.
Yeah.
You pay a couple bucks and you just do the wheel. That's it.
Yep. And real estate's going to be a vehicle forever.
Oh,
it'll alter, it'll change, it'll move,
it's all right.
Ebb and flow of the environment.
But what else can you buy that someone else pays for?
Yeah. And we can end it on that.
Well,
because that's an awesome way to end it. Dude, I appreciate your time. You're a friggin' legend in this industry.
Thanks,
and what you've accomplished in the mountains and the valleys that you've gone through are epic. And so I appreciate you, brother, for being on the show. Thank you so much for your generosity and your time and sharing. And we'll post all your links. People, will people know how to find you?
Rod's links is the best thing. Yeah. It's got all my social media there. And by the way, I answer every question there. So if you got a question, if you go to Rod's links and you hit me up on Instagram or something, you'll or Facebook, I answer every question. And then again, the goal setting is there. My boot camp site is there. Use the code RODFRIEND. You come for $97, and I don't sell anything for 2 days of training. Again, tell me your excuse. And it comes with those kick-ass bonuses. So there's no excuse if you're interested in this business. But if it's not, then go learn something else. But again, rodslinks.com. I hope you listen to my podcast. You'll get a ton. That's free. And you get a ton of value about real estate from the podcast as well.
Yeah. Guys, listen, I'm going to say this. You won't know if you're interested in this business, or you won't know the risks or the upside if you don't start educating yourself. And this is a great place to start. Rod's a good friend. And I'm personally endorsing him because I know what he delivers. I know how he delivers it. And finding somebody who is going to intertwine this science of achievement and the mindset on the art of fulfillment side is very, very hard to find, and you wouldn't find a better mentor. So I appreciate you being on the show,
Thanks,
dude.
Brother.
This has been a huge time spent, and I'm grateful. So thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have an awesome week. We'll see you next week.